Boris Johnson is ending his time in office with as much grace and dignity as we've come to expect. While Brits suffer a cost of living crisis and our NHS faces collapse, he's been cosplaying as a soldier.
So what we're going to do now is going to breach and make entry, push across to the side, keep it water.
It's going well.
So,
Oh, great. That went well. Total success.
And the only part of Boris Johnson's job that he actually wants to do involves, you guessed it, getting cushy taxpayer-funded jobs for his friends. Yes, it has emerged that Boris Johnson is planning to pack the House of Lords with his cronies in his last week as PM. And it was all revealed, somewhat bizarrely, by former Prime Minister Gordon Brown. So he's looking very serious after coming into the possession of documents shared by the lobbying firm run by Linton Crosby. He's writing this in The Guardian. And he says, the document proposes that Johnson ride roughshod over every convention and standard of propriety in an effort to secure political nominees who will vote for the Tory government, especially its bill to disown the international treaty it has itself signed over Northern Ireland. This draft plan to add 39 to 50 new Tory peers includes an extraordinary requirement that each new peer sign away their right to make their own judgment on legislation that comes before them. They have to give, the paper says, a written undertaking to attend and vote with the government. Now, the numbers alone would make this plan pretty extraordinary. It is convention that outgoing prime ministers give out peerages as they leave office, but a figure of 39 would be more than double those given out by any previous prime minister. And the idea of binding the votes of peers is also pretty unusual. The Lords is supposed to provide scrutiny for legislation, not rubber stamp it. And the method proposed to ensure loyalty is also pretty gross. So Brown explains, the plan also legitimises straightforward bribery. In a throwback to the old corruption that was a feature of 19th century Tory Britain, compliant lords will be rewarded with lucrative special envoy positions, and while those who fail to attend votes will be placed on a name and shame list. CBEs and additional titles will be handed out, responding to what is an apparently insatiable demand for the already ennobled to be showered with additional honours on top of their peerages. Ash, the Lords is a pretty shoddy organisation. I'm not sure we feel particularly precious about the conventions of who does and who doesn't get a peerage. But this idea that you just push 39 to 50 people with close connections to you into the House of Lords and then offer them further goodies if they back your policies, it's kind of taking this to the next level, isn't it?
It's absolutely taking the piss. But Boris Johnson is using every lever available to him to warp the system in his and the Conservatives' favour. So I don't actually blame him. He's doing something which is entirely within the law, which is take a bunch of cronies who have either worked to secure your personal political advancement of that of your party. There was also, of course, a recent study done which showed that once you hit the £3 million donation line for the Conservative Party, that you tend to be nailed on for a peerage. And it's a grift which works really well for them. Now, we've known for a really long time that our constitutional arrangements are not at all robust, that they work on everyone playing by some sense of propriety, which everyone is automatically supposed to have. Then along comes Boris Johnson who goes, nah, actually, that doesn't apply to me. And we go, ooh, well, we can't do much more than a very stern finger wagging. I think there is also a political purpose to this, as well as a just obvious, quite naked, corrupt purpose of rewarding those who've been personally loyal to you, is that, of course, the Lords have a role of scrutinising legislation and passing it back down. And that means when the government tries to force through legislation which is wildly unlawful, conflicts with other existing bits of law, and could be open to challenges in the court, the Lord sends it back down. Now, as every Tory leadership candidate has expressed an interest in scrapping the Human Rights Act, doing all sorts of things which totally tear up the UK's pre-existing commitments to international law, having a House of Lords stuffed to the gills with cronies rather than experts is something which just helps that process a little more along the way.
So you've already mentioned that donating to the Conservative Party can help you get a seat in the House of Lords. Let's take a bit more of a detailed look at the proposed clutch of new peers. The Telegraph reports on a list of candidates that is currently circulating amongst civil servants. As usual, of course, those who donated to the Tory party or even Boris Johnson directly come out on top. David Ross is one of them. He's a co-founder of Carphone Warehouse. And by February 2020, he had donated £700,000 to the Tory party and £10,000 to Johnson's 2019 leadership campaign. Perhaps most importantly, he also sorted out a £15,000 exclusive holiday in Mustique for Boris Johnson in 2019. Next up is Ben Elliott, who is not a donor to the Tories, but rather their most lucrative fundraiser. Elliott is the nephew of Camilla Parker Bowles, and his high society connections landed him the job as Tory party co-chair. In that role, he raised £37.4 million in the 3 months before the 2019 election alone. Elliott has been accused of selling access to ministers in exchange for big donations to the party. Finally of note is this lady, Lyubov Chernukin. She's the wife of Vladimir Chernukin, a former deputy minister of finance in Vladimir Putin's government. She has paid thousands to play tennis with Boris Johnson and has donated nearly £2 million to the Tory party. In exchange, she has apparently had extraordinary access to Johnson's government. The Times reported that she repeatedly lobbied ministers against raising tax on the super rich, even handing them research from Ernst & Young about the importance of the ultra-rich to the economy. Ash, the feeling always strikes me when we go through these lists, and we do it, fairly often on the show because it is pretty shocking how you get to be a legislator in this country. It's kind of cheap, isn't it? I couldn't afford this, but £2 million, it's like 2 houses in a pretty rundown area of London. And for that, you can get a seat in Britain's legislature.
That was the thing that really astonished me about the Richard Desmond property development story. Do you remember that? So he purchases a dinner at the cost of, say, I think £10,000, £12,000, makes a chunky donation to the Conservative Party. And then because he wants to develop a property in Tower Hamlets, he's able to utilise his relationship with the, I think it was either the housing minister or the communities minister, I forget which one, in order to dodge paying a £55 million tax bill. Now, that, if you're somebody like Richard Desmond and you are obscenely wealthy, is absolute peanuts in order to totally warp the decision-making process in your favour. So you're right. It is cheap, and it's because the Tories have cheapened our democracy. They've flogged off every single aspect for it. And because they can't be trusted with the economy, Michael, they don't even get a good price for it.